Chapter 20. All will be revealed. Luke 12:2. So I'd been through my fair share of drama at the hands of BKK Crims. I knew I'd probably be safe as long as I didn't go to Khao San Road. The train station was in the same area as where Al-Mami lived that time, so I'd have to hot-foot it out of there in a taxi to the airport, or even the subway. They were safe because they were so populated with people and security guards at nearly every station. I had to be careful. Luckily, I was already on high alert. When I got to Chiang Mai, I thought I'd done the same thing as in Singapore. Not booked accommodation, instead planning on walking around and finding something. A look into my email showed that I had booked a hostel dorm when I'd booked the Singapore-Chiang Mai flight while lying sleeplessly in my hostel capsule. I should have found a different one instead and wore the cheap one-night price for the Loy Hotel. That would have thrown them off the scent, at least for a little while. I didn't though, and I don't know how much of a difference that would have made. I'll never know now. The Loy Hotel was manned or womaned by a young Thai woman and a tall, thin and attractive ladyboy or trans woman. They were both initially polite to me, nothing out of the ordinary. My dorm bed wasn't ready yet, so I opted to wait in reception. I had the idea to hire a motorcycle and they were more than obliging. A young Thai guy showed up fairly quickly with a lovely little red 125cc step-through. I have an international license, but in my haste to leave the country, I'd forgotten it. He said that wasn't an issue. He asked whether I wanted to leave 5,000 baht as a deposit, or my passport. I'd gotten out heaps of cash at the airport, but I didn't have quite that much. So I riskily opted for him to hold my passport. He gave me a receipt with the business name, address, and a WhatsApp number. I asked him his name and he said, "Don't worry about it, call me Mr. Handsome." An older Thai male was there to pick him up on another motorcycle. He laughed at this joke. I sure as shit did not. I'd just given away my passport. Again, I should have withdrawn the rental. I was so damn excited to race around the old Chiang Mai town on this shiny red motorcycle, which I proceeded to do next. The old town is a series of squares, all concentrated around waterways that look more like man-made swimming pools. I managed to get completely lost, which I loved. It was incredibly hard to navigate on a phone that I wasn't going to turn on my location. I'd look for landmarks when I was coming here in the taxi, namely weed shops. I was fully looking forward to them. It was legal here. I could relax and get stoned wherever I went. I'd never been in a country where you could openly smoke weed. You kind of can in Australia, but it's still frowned upon. Anything went in crazy Thailand anyway, but this weed thing was definitely one less thing that the cops could threaten to jail you over unless you produced a bribe. Riding on no international license was another. I just hoped I'd get away with it. I sped around getting more and more lost and treating the finding of the small one-way road that the Loy was on as a challenge. I eventually stopped at a cute little cafe and ordered a strong macchiato. I asked a lovely gay couple who was sitting next to me if they could help me with directions. I didn't have to admit that I basically couldn't operate my maps properly. They got out their own phones, showed me the route to the Loy, and I committed it to memory. I was basically across from the soy I wanted, but something had made me keep missing it as I passed. I was on the cafe's Wi-Fi, so I could at least bring up a satellite view of the building at the corner of the waterside road. I thanked them profusely and had more luck with finding it this time. I decided to do a bit of washing. After dumping my gear in an empty dorm, I came downstairs with a bag of clothes. I went to ask the two women on reception. The ladyboy was very effervescent about helping me. She threw a cheeky comment to the other one who said, "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" Enjoying what? Helping me? I didn't think too hard about it. She charged me a bit too much to do my washing for me, but I agreed anyway. Something told me not to mess with this elegant woman. I wasn't planning on it. I just wanted a holiday. While waiting for my clothes, I took my phone and tablet out to the communal kitchen and kind of beer garden on the furthest end of the property. This was where I could smoke, I imagined. I tried to hook into their Wi-Fi, but it wasn't having it. A young Asian male came and sat at the table behind me. When I turned to him, I noticed he was staring at me intently. He asked me about the Wi-Fi, and I confirmed that it was shit. So off he went to ask. Okay, that's all that was about. He wasn't specifically sitting near me for any reason. When he came back, he sat against the wall closest to reception. I hooked into my mobile network back home. It cost $5 each time, but I needed online access for internet banking. This was probably safer than their overused Wi-Fi anyway. I hadn't taken any pics, so I wasn't uploading to Insta. This was not an online holiday. I'd even tried to buy a tourist SIM card, but I had to present my passport. There was no way this was happening. I decided to take off on foot, this time to find a weed shop. I couldn't find the one I'd seen from the taxi, but soon found another just around the corner. I couldn't find a small enough amount, but I decided to get it anyway. It was like being in a candy store. Colourful names and containers of all sorts of varieties. And the bit I looked forward to. I described my preferred stone to the boys behind the counter and they gave suggestions. It was usually sativa for a body, not head stone. I also got some THC oil. I certainly wouldn't get through all of that before I took off for Vietnam. I'd give it a red hot go though. The boys at the counter looked like they'd been through some heavy shit in their life. I hope that they got to get out of whatever gang shit they used to do because of the legitimacy of the drugs they probably used to sell. They probably still sold yaba, meh, if you asked right. I'd had my macchiato, so I was fine in that department. I was after head bandanas and wanted to take advantage of the great rag trade that is one of Thailand's exports. Racing around on the motorcycle made me wish I'd bought some of the biker buffs that I wore when I rode my own bike. They protect your hair, particularly in the very used helmet I was rocking, and one for my face to protect against fumes and bits and pieces flicking me in the face. Plus a bandana worn on the face looks badass. I really needed a bit of that. I found myself on the banks of an actual river, not the concrete-lined waterways that I'd circled and circled, or squared, rectangled, on the bike. There was a really high bridge and I climbed the steps and walked halfway across. There seemed to be a whole new city over the other side. Chiang Mai was a beautiful old lady of a place, unlike the sleaze that is some bits of Bangkok. I still love BKK, but its version of the old city, where all the tourists flocked, was off limits to me. Like I mentioned, the last thing I needed was to be recognised by African gangsters. As I walked back to the stairs of the bridge, a whole stack of Euro-looking young people were coming towards me. They didn't get out of my path, instead standing in the way, causing me to push past. I muttered under my breath, rude. They didn't even acknowledge my existence. It was yet another weird thing after 3 weeks of extremely weird shit, so I just took it in my stride. They were all HNLTR couples, I figured. They thought more of themselves in this huge group. Thai people would never. You can't choose the class or classlessness of tourists. There were so many dickheads around when you travelled. Thankfully, I found a beautiful shop that had a great range of bandanas. I even went out and got more cash to pay them, because everyone prefers cash. I really didn't want to use my card much anyway. A huge store all run by women who were turning on the Thai hospitality. I know it's for making sales, but when I'm the focus of friendliness by a group of Thai women, older and younger, it truly makes everything better. And return it with giving notes and saying no change. A simple tip is all I can do to make their lives easier. Right now, if they didn't have incels tracking them down in places they least expected, then their lives were already easier than mine. I have to remember that I'm now in a part of the world where local women are hunted and owned. Human trafficking is huge in Thailand. My teaching at the Women's Centre in Pattaya taught me some pretty scary aspects of trafficking. All the women were so pleased and felt privileged to be enrolled in the classes there, getting certificates in English to assist with the hospitality work they had to do. This sounds like they're being trained to communicate better with the male sex tourists. It wasn't. It was so they'd understand what fucked up things these males were saying in front of them and thought weren't understood by the women. Such boys. It was arming them against grown-ass boys. They were taught German for these reasons too. Also, if they wound up in an English or German-speaking country as a wife, they may have a shot at having their own freedom in those countries while still in a repressive marriage, or hopefully getting out of a bad relationship and supporting themselves. The remedial massage courses and hairdressing were offered for alternative careers when women unfortunately are aged out of being hospitality workers. Even the ones who were superficially still having to work in sex massage because of their looks. Maybe I would have transitioned to legitimate massage jobs. The Thai Catholic nun who ran the school was under no illusion about any of the sex work customers from other countries. She painted them all with the same brush. All the other teachers were in their 20s and their naivety got to me sometimes. One such one, a German girl, tall and conventionally beautiful. Unfortunately, the students were so brainwashed by conditioning that they basically worshipped this woman for her looks. Stuck up for the men, saying that they had alcohol problems and needed just as much help as the women. Sister was so controlled and I admired her. Yes, I've been asked to offer counselling and help for the men in this town. There's too much work with women. Our plates are full. This airhead of a woman had a boyfriend. I would place money on the fact that he was in the manosphere. He was probably helping himself to other women while she selflessly worked to improve Thai society. There's one born every minute. Her and the male, that is. Women within the school sometimes weren't as they appeared. They were recruited by crims to offer work opportunities to women at the school that were inevitably human trafficking situations. We were told to be on alert for these. I heard a young woman telling another teacher about how a group of them were going to India for work. This teacher, a very caring young Syrian French woman, said, "Please be careful." This was all we could do, really. We couldn't stop them. Lessons in Hindi would be so useful in this place. We were told not to befriend the students. I found this incredibly hard. For once I'd gone through my baptism by fire, where I was treated quite roughly by them. This is understandable. They didn't trust me. They were so full of love and respect for me. I ended up befriending and hanging out with a woman my age who looked like she was in her 20s. She took me out in a convertible Mercedes-Benz with the top down. I bought her story that she had married a wealthy German who died after he'd paid a big sum to her family for his right to her in marriage. She'd then become a bit of a real estate mogul. She also had a male who kind of owned her, though he lived in Singapore. I met this orange-haired Brit once. When older males live in Southeast Asia and are around beautiful women, they rightfully feel self-conscious and dye their hair black. Perhaps young, attractive Thai males make them feel insecure too. The black dye is too heavy for their lifeless grey hair, so they leave it to fade out. It goes orange. They're too vain to just shave it off. Hence, orange heads. I didn't like this one. It wasn't out of the realms of possibility that this amazing, friendly woman was doing recruiting for this asshole. No women had cars like that. Me, in my ignorance, could have provided legitimacy to her by being friends. Thailand was no country for Thai women. I got back to the hotel as peak hour was starting and the sky was darkening. There were some Euro-looking guys out front. I was about to go in and turn back to talk to them. I really wanted connection with carefree travellers after being around those young Dingleford males who were abominations to their generation. I asked them if they knew whether we could just smoke weed in public. They were standoffish and didn't seem to know. I said that I'd just bought quite a lot and probably wouldn't get through it all, so was willing to offload it to someone. One of them pointed at another and implied he might be into it. He asked how much. I misinterpreted this to mean how much had I originally paid, instead of how much I would sell it to him for. I told him the shop price. They weren't communicative anymore, so I turned and walked away. I heard them saying, "Wow, that's expensive." They didn't seem interesting, so I didn't clarify. They wouldn't be receiving my free weed. When I waited at reception to get my clothes off the ladyboy, there was a South American nation-looking male next to me. He was broad-shouldered and I didn't look at him as an attractive male. I just got extremely bad vibes off him, like he was a crim or something. He thanked them and then left out the door. The ladyboy was smarmy when she gave me back my clothes. I put this all out of my mind and went to the communal kitchen to refill my water bottle after my long-ass hike. An incredibly hot young male in his late 20s was getting something out of the fridge. We both seemed to strike up a conversation at the same time. He was American, over 6 feet, with beautiful features thanks to his African ancestry. He was a lucky 10. I genuinely fell in love with the tapestry coat he was rocking. "Check out the drip on you." I was a bit ashamed of myself for using black slang, but he reacted positively. "I'm off to Japan tomorrow, so I wanted to look good." Well, it's a great choice, I observed. I was flirting. I couldn't stop myself. Good attention from someone who looked like him couldn't hurt after the bullshit with Jimmy. After the bullshit with James. He joined in and replied loadedly, "Well, I'm attracted to things of beauty." Get out of town. I didn't imagine that was meant for me, but maybe it was. I stopped flirting because I'm no good at it. "So are you US or Canada?" When he replied US, I moved the conversation to the unsexy topic of the upcoming US election. "What do you think?" I think either option would be very interesting. He wasn't giving me much. I guess that he was smart enough to not say his preferred side, and who'd know what he was. Kamala could possibly be a choice because she was a black woman, but he was also a young male who could possibly be radicalized by the manosphere, making him a Trump stan. I told him my position with no qualms. I'm hoping Trump wins because he'll fuck up and his supporters will finally see what a hot mess he is. Then hopefully he can be gone for good. The US is not in the best state, so he can inherit all the problems, make them worse, and cop the blame. It's time the US was no longer the central power of the world. And the fact that they're putting Kamala up there in the first place, all corporate companies do that. Install a woman CEO to take the blame for the rough patch that a company is going through. When it's over and she's fixed it, then they put a man in. They like to see women fixing or failing. He'd not thought of that theory, and I could tell he found it pretty interesting. He talked more about how it would be good to have a woman of colour be elected. I got the feeling that he was a Trump supporter though. He was just being charming. Well, knock yourself out, darling. Goddess, it was good to be flirting with a beautiful man after the excuses for them in Dingleford, in Singapore, in Changi Airport. They were all around me, outnumbering the ones like this. We introduced ourselves at some stage and he said his name was Han. I flirted again when I said, "Oh, that's lucky, that's what I call everyone, Han." At another stage, he brought up a book he'd read just out of nowhere. I guess it had to do with black people in America. It had colonization and civilization in the title. He wielded the fact he'd read it like he was an intellectual who knew more than me. From what I could tell from the title, it sounded like a book I'd be fully in agreement with. Unless it was some Kanye West BS where the blame for colonization of black and brown people sat squarely on the victims of colonization. Before I could ask him to elaborate, he took a phone call, so I made my exit. I went back to my dorm, grabbed some clothes out and took a shower. In the meantime, 2 of my dorm mates appeared to be there when I got back. I think one had been sleeping and I hadn't noticed him. In the bunk beside me, on the same bottom level as me, was another African guy, though he was from Germany. In the bunk bed diagonally, also on the bottom level, was a Turkish guy. They both started talking to me as I loaded my stuff back into my locker at the far end of the room. I was wearing a tight singlet with no bra, so I held my towel up to cover my obvious nips, hard from the AC. I didn't need these two ogling my nipples. They were both friendly enough. The German started going on with some sus shit though. He was saying how Thai women were hassling him and grabbing him, trying to ply their wares, i.e. selling their sexual favours to him. I wondered what soys he'd been down to run into this. If I did that to women walking past, I'd be arrested. If it's women though, it's okay. Aha, another manosphere dickhead revealing his naivety about life. As if those women were going to rape him. Whereas if he groped women as they went past, the obvious assumption by practically everyone would be that he was a potential rapist. These young ones didn't want to understand that. They felt that just because they weren't rapists, then they shouldn't be considered as one. Big news, Junior. We all consider every strange man we meet as potential rapists. I started to tell he and the Turkish guy about my time in Pattaya. What you don't understand is those women have a duty to look after their whole family, extended and all. The eldest daughter has to make money for her parents, whereas the eldest son just has to make money for his new family, wife, kids, etc. So there's pressure for young women to go into the sex trade. She can support her brothers and sisters and their partners and sometimes their in-laws. It's a huge burden on their shoulders. Aren't their parents embarrassed about them? Again, with the naivety of a boy who's just found out that sex work is considered embarrassing and being too young to understand small-minded societal conditioning. They are, and they don't talk about it, but they happily take the money and build big houses in their villages. They end up being envied by others, so they push their daughters into it more. It's very hypocritical. I hoped I was making this lad ashamed of his silly complaints about some beautiful Thai women touching his arm. They're not naturally born with compassion, that's for sure, and the manosphere kills off any that may have been instilled in them by their mothers. They're mostly a lost generation. I hated myself for rewarding them with sex, but I also believed that if I stopped the sessions and they mistook this feeling for heartbreak, they don't have hearts to begin with, so it wasn't like I was hurting genuinely nice males. Victimless crime. I sat on my bed and started to yarn with the Turk. The German didn't like this, so he took off. We talked motorcycles and he told me about a huge trip he'd been on around the mountains that lay around Chiang Mai. It was hundreds of kilometres and went for days. He was so lucky. This was what I wanted to do. Inspired, I checked out a few mountainous spots that lay nearby that could probably be done in a day, and I could hand the bike back after that. I asked him if he wanted to come too. He looked down and quietly said no. He gave no reason why. My mind briefly flew to the panic of, he knows about the IBA footage and he doesn't want to hang out with a tainted woman. I didn't know, so I let it go. I started to scroll Insta and left him to it. A little while later, when it was dark, I decided to get up and go down for a durry. Maybe Hot American would be there. As I entered the large open communal space, I spied a table of about 4 young skippy males. You can so easily tell young Australian males when travelling without speaking to them. They dress the same, hoodies or surf shirts, shorts, and the same ridiculous haircuts that are in vogue for their demographic. I guess Euro guys all look generic too, but it's a different look. These ones had surfer bobs. I was immediately filled with fear. They would have access to the IBA footage. I took one step backwards and hid behind a column before turning on my heel and getting the fuck out of there. I went to the elevator. 2 males stood in front of it. They were older, in their 30s. One was possibly Papua New Guinean. He wore his hair in long braids piling from a fountain on top of his head. He was huge. The other was tall, white, and dressed like a Sydney leb. I got big Western Sydney gangster vibes from him. He faced away from me and never once turned around. The PNG leaned forward over 1 foot, hand on hips, and gave me a look that said, "Well, look what we have here." It wasn't pleasant admiration. It was more sinister than that. My whole body reacted and I sucked my teeth and made a clicking sound at him, which was full of chewed. I couldn't believe I was so bold in front of 2 very scary-looking males. What was with all these sus dudes checking into this place? If they were gangsters, there's no way they'd stay here. They'd get the best hotel and splurge their money on hookers and coke. They looked like that very type. There was no way I was going to get in an elevator with them, such was my body's alarm system. I walked past them and up the stairs. Back in my room, Turkish guy was lying shirtless and face down on the bed, scrolling something and laughing. He looked like he was about to fap. I thought nothing of it. The next weird thing to happen, so many weird things, this was my new life, was an Israeli girl came into the dorm with her massive roly-poly expensive luggage and took the top bunk behind me. I started a chat with her to be friendly and wished I hadn't. This was how I found out she was Israeli. So many Israelis staying here. The unfriendly boys out the front were Israeli also. I tried to make my greeting as friendly as possible and not showing my opinion of them, which was, I hoped they weren't pro-Zionist, but instead the progressive ones who were against the Palestinian attacks and Netanyahu. I managed it, I felt. This girl then told me how they'd come to Chiang Mai on one of those coaches that have beds and curtains. I was thinking of getting one of them to Vietnam and cutting out BKK altogether. She said they were comfortable and a good trip. Though she was replying to my questions, there was a reticence about her, like she wished she wasn't talking to me. She said that she was going downstairs and did it with that long drawn out, "Anyway, I'm off." Subtext, I've been speaking to you for too long and I didn't even want to in the first place. This was weird. I myself got the urge to go downstairs. I spied the American when I went outside. He was about to talk to me, but I headed over to where my bike was parked to sit on it instead. I wanted to play it a bit cool around him. He was a bit too hot. There was a woman sitting on my bike, so I just leaned up against the wall. It was a good icebreaker. She was a young Taiwanese woman, absolutely beautiful and elegantly smoking a cigarette. I fully turned my back on Hon, my bi-ness bringing itself out of wherever I'd stashed it. It didn't happen very often, and I was captivated when it did. If this woman hit on me, I'd be there in a shot. I should have felt a bit inadequate around her, particularly if Hon was also witnessing her. Maybe she was the phone call he'd received. We talked about Taiwan and she said it's a really great place to visit. I promised her I would. Safe Asian countries that weren't popular with Aussies were popular with me. She too excused herself from the chat. I was sensing a bit of a pattern here. I had to remember that I was older and probably a weird addition to this hostel hotel. Once upstairs, I again scrolled Insta. I spoke intermittently to the Turk when he talked to me. I wasn't after his attention. I made my own excuses that I was going to sleep. He said the words, "Yeah, you better. You're gonna need it." I lay there, cutting my nail cuticles with a sharp tool and considering everything. What was going on here? Why were all these sus criminal-looking males checking into this hotel? Why was that Israeli woman and the Taiwanese woman treating me like they were? What were the fucking skips doing here? They were the type to go to Koh Samui, maybe BKK, just to get their ugly little dicks wet. All I had to defend myself was this nail tool. Surely I wasn't going to be attacked in this public place. Suddenly my mind reacted in incredulity. What the fuck was I doing here when I could easily leave and stay somewhere else, somewhere safer? I quickly packed up all my stuff, now realizing that time was of the essence. The Turkish male continued to lay on his stomach and look at what I suspected was porn of me. He made no comment about me obviously looking like I was leaving. I guess he just thought I'd move rooms, though still be in the same building. Still be accessible. He hadn't been creepy or sleazy. It was the, "You're going to need it," sleep. As I walked past the female bathroom, my Israeli doormate was in there, brushing her teeth. She managed a look of such smugness and condescension that was hard to execute, with a mouthful of toothpaste and brush. It was all in her eyes. Wow, what a bitch. And what a tell. I went downstairs and sat on the reception couches. I tried to get through on the WhatsApp number of the motorcycle guy. No answer. This wasn't good. All of my experiences with hiring motorcycles told me that they'll answer at any time of the night or day. I'd never had to ring them with bad news of their bike. I'd just received their info loud and clear when they'd said they were available on their number 24/7. There was a new receptionist on the desk. No sign of the ladyboy or her partner in crime. This woman was very young and pretty unfriendly to me. The evidence that there was something going on was building. I asked her if she could try to contact the motorcycle guy as I really needed my passport back. She didn't want to, saying that he wouldn't open till 9 a.m. in the morning. I insisted, saying, "Yeah, that's not right. They're meant to be available 24/7. I could go out and crash that motorcycle and I need to be able to tell them." She relented and dialed the number. "No answer," she replied. I was bristling with suspicion. "Can I see what number you're dialing?" I heard a scoff come from behind the mesh wall of the reception. It was the back divider between the communal kitchen and the reception desk and lobby. The scoff came from Hon. I did not expect this. So he was in on whatever this was. That'd check out. His flirting with me earlier was some sort of move to make me non-suspicious about the place. It didn't work, and he obviously didn't have the commitment to keep it up. A smarter male would have come out and carried on with the flirting, calmed me down with his charm. Instead, he came out to speak with the receptionist. This was an incredibly weird interaction. "What time do you finish? Can I come see you when you finish?" Various other heavy-handed pickup lines that passport bros use in Southeast Asia because they have absolutely no problems with the women seeing their ultra-sleazy side. It's a phenomenon that I'd witnessed in BKK back when I'd come on stock buying trips for my business, back when I was still drinking and would frequent bars. These males would cattily ignore me and carry on like this with the other local women having absolutely no shame about how gross their behaviour was. The women could refuse them, but they knew there'd be absolutely no way they'd mock them. It has shades of pedo grooming behaviour also, talking to these women like they're little girls. And the receptionist was following suit, flirting along with him but not letting him know when her knock-off time was. No definite answer that she would meet him afterwards. She was in a tight spot. Then he seemed to whisper to her, a whisper that I heard in my spot diagonally across from the desk in an ante-room with two couches, one against the wall and one against the window. I was reading a book on my tablet, and ironically it was about an Aussie woman who evaded her warrants for years, going on the run in her van. It was a good yarn, but nothing was going into my head from the digital pages. "Is our friend here causing you trouble?" I didn't hear her reply. There seemed to be a bit of silence as she obviously relayed the details of our interaction. She was better at this than him. I wondered why he'd been so obvious in front of me. Was it to make me jealous, since he'd seen into me before? Was it a cack-handed way to get the receptionist on side? Or was he just like all the uncontrollable old boomers that come here and flirt like amateurs? He then seemed to get the courage to come talk to me, although he sounded pretty relaxed with the upper hand. "Are you just going to sit there and read your Kindle all night? As opposed to doing what, you sex pest?" Because the receptions in Thailand hotels did tend to stay open all night, then yes, that was my plan exactly. "Come outside for a cigarette with me." I wanted to draw him out, watch his behaviour without asking him straight up. He reticently agreed. I saw his confidence dip a little. We sat under cover with me sitting on my motorbike. It was teeming with monsoonal rain. We hopped straight into the discussion of society and politics. I don't know if he initiated this or I did. Either way, he brought up the book he'd read, the Colonization and Civilization one. Was this the only book he'd ever read? We certainly were no longer flirting. It was time for me to plead my case to show him I was on the same page as him regarding colonization, because the indignant tone in his voice whenever he brought up his precious book seemed to be levelled at me for being from a colonizing culture. With all his wide reading experience, sarcastic, I'm sure he knew the horrific history of Australian colonisation that was disgustingly close to the present day. No one knows or talks about the Indigenous Australian history. They're possibly the oldest known civilization in the world. The Brits claimed that they were savages and saved them when they arrived. But all across the northern part of Australia, they'd been trading with people who came from Indo, from Timor, from Asia in general. Eventually, they would have gotten the technologies from Asia and evolved with them. White people didn't discover Australia and Aborigines. There's records of an elder in Singapore. He wasn't forced to go back to England and be presented like a zoo animal. He willingly went with the Asians as a sort of ambassador to Singapore. No one talks about that. I probably didn't sound this sharp, but I had my thoughts in order when I rapid-fired them. Hon was gulping and stammering. Why wasn't he agreeing with me, pleased that I was on the side of the colonised, not the colonisers? My immediate take was that he didn't expect that I was so progressive in my views. Australia is ruined. Aboriginal society was ruined by colonisation, and the nation is a dark place. Or was he on the side of colonisation? He was here as the only black US representative. No others from his country and particularly culture were with him. Was he siding with the bullies on the side of colonisation? Either way, he ended the convo quickly and took off, leaving me to finish my smoke. The interactions I saw from my position on the couch. Before his sleazy pickup technique to the receptionist and our discussion outside, some Portuguese with their huge expensive roly-poly luggage. I didn't know they were on site. It was mentioned by Hon. Were yarning with him. He seemed to be welcoming them and farewelling them at the same time. Was he some kind of events organiser and these guests were part of the event? And a very telling one. One of the Jewish princesses, I know this is not PC of me, and I do believe in PC culture. All bets are off because these women weren't good people. Came to the desk with her roly-poly expensive luggage and asked to be put into a dorm. I don't want to be on my own in the room. She was opting for a dorm over a private room. How weird. Unless she wanted the safety of the company of the other Jewish princesses and Israeli males. They should have an insulting name, like the princesses. IDF head cases? That'll do. IDF HCs. She had to be booked into this hotel to be where the action was, but couldn't handle the communal living of a dorm. What was she seeking safety from? I started to get my answers when Hon went back to his laptop in the communal area and started to talk to a Thai male, very loudly, over Skype or some other platform. I was too shocked to be able to relay it in any order. I'll just drop sentences I remember. I usually do this for free. I get heaps of pussy in Vietnam. At least I'm getting paid for this. I know. Why would you put that on the open market? Have you got all the criminals organised? Yes, everything's organised here. And so much more. He had absolutely no qualms of saying all this in earshot of me. He was purposely saying all this in earshot of me. So this was the event. He wanted me to hear it. I probably offended him when I had debated better than him, and he was a soft bitch who couldn't handle it. He was revealing everything. I now knew everything. The event was me. They were going to gang rape me here in the Loy Hotel.